Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Wednesday, June 11th. The NWSL is back for just a few weeks before the next international break, and we had to take a beat and talk about probably the biggest story over the international break before and after, which is the coaching change for the Washington Spirit. I have more questions than answers, so I brought in an old friend. I brought in Jason Anderson of USA Today and Pro Soccer Wire, who is on the ground in Washington, D.C., to give me the scoop on how the coaches are feeling, the players are feeling, the fans are feeling, and what this means for Michele Kang's soccer empire going forward. Let's jump in. So the NWSL is back for actually kind of a brief period here. They're going to play a couple weeks of games, and then it's going to be off to all of the big tournaments for Copa America Femenil. We're going to have the Euros. The NWSL is going to take a little bit of a break, but let's take a moment here to take some stock of one of the bigger stories of the NWSL over even, some news that broke over the international break, what we've seen before and after, which is that Jonatan Giraldez is leaving the Washington Spirit a year after he joined midseason from FC Barcelona. He's going to go join Spirit owner Michele Kang's European side. All right, so I'll hit you with this first. We have Jason Anderson here of USA Today, Pro Soccer Wire. How do you say the new name of Olympic Lyon?
I took Spanish and not French. I've just been saying OL Lyonnes.
Yeah.
It's not a real word.
Right, exactly.
So they've run into the problem of we already don't know what to call you because it might be the same, but I would defer to any French speaker in the world over me.
Yeah, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to stick with Lyon. I'm going to say it's the historic name. So everyone understands. Giraldez is joining Spirit owner Michele Kang's European side, OL Lyonnes. He's still in Washington. He's coaching until the international break, right? Adrian Gonzalez, who was the interim prior to Giraldez joining the team, is set to replace him. The Spirit are doing fine, right? They're in third, really nice 3-1 win over North Carolina this weekend. But it's starting to feel, and maybe not like history is repeating itself, but it's like a smaller version, perhaps, of some of the issues that have plagued the Spirit in the past. I am joined today by Jason Anderson, like I said, writer at USA Today and Pro Soccer Wire, but you also have covered the Spirit for many years. You are the expert here. I brought you in to defer to you. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions that I don't even know if you know the answer to, because there's a lot happening here, only in the small picture for the Spirit and the big picture. But let's start maybe just right now. You were at that game this weekend. What's the energy? How are the players feeling? What does the coaching staff feel like? What is the energy maybe a few weeks after this announcement?
There's different answers for all of those different groups of people, I think. I think every one of I will say the unifying thread for all of those groups is they needed to win. Okay. Not just for this news, but also the fact that they've lost 3 times at home. They also came a couple seconds away from doing it again against Utah. They really needed that from the basics of sports perspective, but then every constituent party did also need a victory for some reason or another. For Giraldez, it lowers the amount of pressure or the perception that there's a distraction being caused by his departure. It's still going on, but if you win the game 3-1, it's not as bad. I think the players, it was an interesting thing, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but there was a press conference ahead of the game that was sort of normally news this big, you do that separate. That would be a different press conference, but they just bundled them all into one.
You would also usually have a general manager or a club president.
They don't,
maybe,
they do not currently have an acting, or they have an interim general manager. That press conference took place in his office because they share space with DC United. That's a whole, we could do 3 episodes probably of this show and not even get through it. But yeah, the players at that press conference kind of struck listen, we're happy for Jonah. We trust Adrian. We should be all right. We know we're a good team. And that was kind of the note they were sounding there. They did, Casey Kruger did mention on Craig Hoffman's podcast that they did have a players only meeting to discuss it. This is not a group of players that acts without intention. They are they've unfortunately experienced a ton. So they know a lot about okay, we need to get together and get ourselves all on the same page and move as a group, because that's the only way this is going to work for us, is if we stick together. And it seems like they did that again. So I think for them, it was a relief. I think also for them coming out of the international break and coming into, this was the first summer weather game for the Spirit this season. It was like 80% humidity. It wasn't actually that hot, but it was brutally humid. And I think coming through the physical demands of the international window and then getting a win on top of it, I think for them it was like, okay, we got through this. Now the next couple of days we're gonna digest the rest of it. They're masters at compartmentalizing that group. Um, as for as for the fans, I think there was I was told, I couldn't hear it, we're at the other end of the stadium, but I was told that fans were chanting in support of Adrian Gonzalez.
Sure.
Um, I don't get the sense that a lot of fans, at least the fans that are online, and there's a big difference between your normies and your diehards. The diehards, at least, are a little salty with Jonah at this point. They feel, I think it's that thing of like, I feel a little put off. I'm personally irritated is more the vibe I'm getting, that people are just like, you said you were coming here for a while and then you bounced at literally, I mean, it is, as far as we know, the first opportunity, which is, it's tough. It's a tough look no matter how you look at it.
Well, let's talk about that for a second before we get into, I mean, I personally, I'll go on record. I think they're overcooking the transition a little bit. I think there's no reason to have Giraldez needing to like paper this over. It's fine. He's moving on. Give the players some closure. Gonzalez is ready to go. But let's talk about kind of what led this. You did some reporting on this. Some other people did some reporting on this. Basically, some of the bits and pieces of this move. Again, like we said, just 1 year after joining the team, this was a huge, big swing by Kang, even to bring Giraldez in. Lyon reportedly comes knocking first, right? This was because of the opening that they had because Joe Montemurro is going to take over for the Matildas. The Athletic reported a source saying, something to the effect of this was best for both sides. Maybe this was something that both camps felt really good about. There was some always speculation of like, he has another baby on the way. Is this a personal decision? Is this an institutional decision? What's your take on how this all came about? And maybe that is the question, is how salty should fans be about this?
I will say, I think I'm trying to remember which press conference it was in, but I think it was in the pregame press conference. He did say, I want to say I asked this. A lot has happened in the last few days.
Right.
But the question was basically like, are you leaving the U.S. for family reasons? Could it be the political environment? Could it be just a general discomfort with, they're training out in the distant suburbs. They are not close to DC by any stretch of the imagination, outside of like, they're closer than like, Claire, I know you're in Chicago. They're closer than you are. But they're not closer than no one would call it close. And he said, he was like, I want to be clear, like, we're happy here. We're not leaving because we don't enjoy our lives in the US. He actually kind of hinted at the idea that he was kind of glad that their second child, him and his partner's second child, would be born in the U.S. I think they're sticking around in part for that to happen. I don't know that, but I think that's kind of reading between the lines.
Sure.
So that's a factor. But yeah, it's. I guess the interesting thing for me is like following the women's game for so long and knowing that Lyon before Kang, going back before John Textor bought that club, and the men's side of that thing, it's a catastrophe that's still going on the men's side. So it's good that they're separate. But they have always been accustomed to, we get what we want. The reason they've racked up all those women's Champions Leagues and why the French league is kind of, Lyon goes and wins the league. Maybe PSG once every 3 or 4 years mounts a serious challenge and that's it. Lyon gets what they want. They just signed Katoto, I believe I saw.
They're taking over France. It's PSG they're down bad, I must say.
Yes, it's grim from a competitor's perspective. It's grim, but they're not a club that is like, well, we understand there's a circumstance somewhere else, so maybe we can't have what we want. They just say like, we will get what we would like. Their sporting director is Markel Zubizarreta, who was the sporting director at Barcelona while Giraldez was there. His position at Caniska is the wording in their press or the press release about that was very specific, and it was that he is the head sporting director. He is the boss at Lyon and London City Lions, and will assist at the Washington Spirit. Which is curious because with all due respect, he's built some incredible teams, but like, what does he know about NWSL? Like, I'm sure it would be the classic thing where he comes in and sees the weird rules and is immediately like, oh, what is this? and needs someone to help him. So I don't know what his assistance can be other than contacts in Europe. And the Spirit,
Right.
to their credit, have made some really, really good signings from abroad in the last year and a half that maybe he played some factor in. I don't know. But what I do know is that he and Jonah work well together, and apparently he said, like, Jonah's the guy I would like, and we're Lyon. We get what we want. Let's go approach the guy that we want. And they did that. So it wasn't necessary. I haven't heard anything saying that like they came in and said like you're getting promoted from the Spirit to Lyon. They didn't.
Right.
They're not framing it that way. But I completely understand why the outside perception is like, yeah, but that is what it is, right? Because it is what it is.
Right.
Let's be upfront about it.
And the multi-club ownership makes it more complicated, right? Where if Giraldez had been poached by a European giant, you go, oh, well, you know, he got poached in the first place to go to the Spirit. He's in great demand. He's a very good manager. But the multi-club ownership, all of these clubs under Michele Kang, like you said, where they have the London City Lionesses, they have Lyon, and they have the Spirit, there is always this question of who is the star child here? Who is the team that's going to get the most investment? And it's interesting because Kang, all three of these teams have a similar history in that they were either in some organizational or financial distress. Kang comes in and solidifies. She does a good job of stabilizing. There's no question about that, right? Like the Lionesses are in the WSL now. Lyon is way better set up than it looked like they were, like you said, under Texter. There was a lot of fear that they were going to die on the vine. The Spirit, like we said, are in third. They were in the championship last year. But how much does this undermine? Ken kind of went on the offensive. She was talking to Forbes. She was like, before actually this came out, she was talking about how, you know, we're not going to siphon talent from one team to another. Does this undermine this idea that all of these teams can be equal under the same ownership?
To a certain extent. And I was thinking about this because I was trying to think of what else has happened where some sort of talent related position has transferred, and the only other moves are Keisha Silla is on loan from Lyon to the Spirit. She just came in and actually has been pretty effective off the bench in the last 6 to 8 weeks. She started seeing more time. A France U23 that filled out the depth chart for the Spirit wasn't necessarily going to displace Lyon's center backs, and by getting her out on loan, it's a high. I mean, let's be honest, it's a higher level. These minutes she's getting are much more meaningful than if they sent her on loan elsewhere in France.
Yes.
And the only other thing I could think of that I could find was it's not a direct one. It's Julia Rodder left the Spirit, went back to Sweden, and then eventually ended up at London City again. So that's about it. There's not a lot of. We don't have that pattern that is in place with the men's side where you see, you know, if you play at NYCFC and MLS, you are not trying to stay there. You are trying to move up to Girona in Spain, and then you're trying to move up to Man City. I don't think it's as explicit as that, but like that's a very much like that's vertical. I'm for the listeners only. I'm gesturing with my hand, unfortunately. This is more of a like a diagonal.
Sure.
And unfortunately, I think it's fair to say that the Spirit are probably in terms of desirable coaching jobs, probably among the top 10 in the world. Yeah. It's just that Lyon is 1A or 1B with Barcelona. Yeah. Maybe you throw Arsenal and Chelsea in, but like that's kind of it. Like there are 4 places that could have signed him, and it just so happens that one person owns 2 of them. Right. And he's moving from one to another very suddenly. It is literally going to be, I think it's like 53 weeks, not even 54 full weeks that he'll have been on the ground in the US.
Right.
And yeah, that's why people are a little put off because if it had been 2 years, people would be like, you know what? Okay, 2 seasons and you bounce. We've seen that. But
right.
Half season 2024, half season 2025, and that's it.
Yeah, with also just what is his footprint at the Spirit? I mean, he great like managing of people, right? Managing the injuries, but what was the Giraldez era? Nobody knows. But I think that's a good point. That's actually something that I hadn't seen articulated before, which is just multi-club ownership is not unique to football, right? We see it in men's soccer all the time. Owning 2 of the top teams in the world is pretty unique, though, and kind of does it kind of talks about how the evaluations are still rising in the women's game, getting in early like Kang did. We talked about how, you know, it seemed like she was overspending for the Spirit a couple years ago, and now we've just seen things explode in terms of evaluation. I'm curious though what this does actually say though about, what's the best way to put this? Do you think this opens a door? Maybe this is the best way to ask. Does this open a door for more movement? Does this feel like the canary in the coal mine moment of Giraldez goes first, try it with a coach? People are upset, but it's a coach. You can find other coaches. But then it turns into more of a talent siphon.
I don't have a sense for that yet.
Yeah.
It's maybe a little too early. The fact that we talked about the Spirit need a GM, I assume that if they find a full time GM and I haven't heard necessarily that they're looking. I'm sure they are, but I haven't heard like, okay, we're getting close or anything like that. It's been a weird season because of you mentioned the injuries. I get questions every week that are like, what about this player's status? How long are they supposed to be out? And it's like, we only have so many questions in each press conference, and there's been too much to tackle. And so there's a lot of unanswered questions at the club. But I will say that I'm sure Giraldez is going to get there and be like, oh, this player could do well in this league. This player could do well in this league.
It's almost about just his experience here, right? Where he
Right.
has like this front row seat to scouting in the NWSL beyond just the fact that he has good relationships with people. No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to get really dramatic here. I was talking around. I'm not going to beat around the bush. We're getting dramatic. Conspiracy theorists unite. Jason, what does this mean for Trinity Rodman?
The fact that she came back
It's
very suddenly
interesting. It's
is
interesting.
probably what stoked this more than anything else. The fact that the news broke and she and Ule Sar both suddenly returned. They were both at the stadium. Both I think I will say I think it's been a little overblown because it's not like Rodman went completely social media silent. Like
right.
if the Spirit had a game, she posted about the game. If someone from the Spirit did something, she was like laughing about it as well. Like she's very much attached to this group of players. She likes, as far as I can tell, she likes the area. It really matters to her that she gets along with her teammates, with the staff, with everyone when you're there. You don't get the sense that you're talking to a global phenomenon when you go talk to her there. It's just like one of the other players. It's an interesting dynamic. I get the sense I'm also of the position that quote she gave earlier this year that everyone keeps bringing up about how she would always she's thought about playing in Europe. I wish I had the exact wording. I would love to drill home the point that I believe that was negotiating through the media more than anything else, and that's just good business. If you're in her shoes, you need to keep that door open because who else can pay you that amount of money?
She's injured in a contract year, which nobody likes, right? And with Emma Hayes said on ESPN last night that she is probably going to return, so it's not even like a full lost year. She is going to play through to the end of this contract, but she's only going to get about a half season to negotiate the next one. So that does make sense to me. So let's pivot slightly to the Spirit themselves and what comes next here. Like, I mean, you talk to these players, I talk to these players. Championship weekend last year, they have always sung the praises of the fact that this coaching staff does a good job of having continuity kind of in the chaos. Do you feel, however, though, and this is maybe the last like feelings question, is when Kang came in to again stabilize the Spirit, that team was in great distress before she took over. Incredibly popular move to take over the Spirit. Does it feel like she is living up to that promise, not of the resources, which we know have been vast? Like the team is in a much better spot, but staffing stability is part of this. Is she, from the player perspective, doing what she said she was going to do on their behalf? And that maybe goes back to, what do you think the mindset is for these players right now?
I think in general, I would sum it up as they have not expressed any real problems with that side of things. But again, they had the team meeting. They made sure that Aubrey Kingsbury and Ashley Hatch spoke to media. It turned out that I don't know if Hatch picked up her back injury the next day that she missed this weekend's game, but
it's possible that she spoke to media injured, right?
Yes, it's possible that she was like, I know I can't play this game, but as a team leader, I need to be here for this one. And not just a team leader, but a team leader on this team who they've been through a lot.
Yeah.
Part of, I think, the framing on my very first question on that, I don't know if the audio cuts off on what they posted online, but it was kind of like, yeah, here we are again. It's literally me standing here in Leesburg, Virginia, asking you two and or Andy Sullivan a
Yeah.
question about a difficult change.
As you noted in your piece last week, what you said, 8 different people have coached the Spirit since 2021, at least coached like one game for the Spirit
Yes,
since
yes,
2021. Yeah.
and a couple of those are one offs, but that's still 6 is pretty high too.
Yep.
2021 is not that long ago. So yeah, I think this would be so much more difficult if Adrian Gonzalez's time last season hadn't been so successful.
Mm-hmm.
And not just successful results wise, but the players really genuinely like him.
Yeah.
He's a likable guy. He's easy to get along with. He's a jokester in a positive way instead of the, we've had some coaches in the past in this league that were jokesters and then it turned out right under the surface was a monster. I don't get any of that. There's zero of that. It's very much a like, we like working with him. We know he's good at his job. He comes from the same coaching education background as Giraldez. That's where they
Yeah.
met. And it's both soccer coaching and also sports science. They were actually in the sports science trainer path when they started out, and they sort of curved back towards the soccer side, which is an interesting. I don't think that happens in the U.S. at all. I don't know if it's common in Spain or if it's just these two people did this and they're the only ones. But so they're coming from very, very similar backgrounds, but they have emphasized like, yeah, there are differences in how we evaluate things. Jonah mentioned that in his press conference on Sunday that, yeah, it will be somewhat different because Adrian's a different person. He
Right.
has different ideas and he'll handle things differently. But yeah, I think overall that is a crucial factor. The fact that it's not just some assistant has been left behind to carry on the plan. It's an assistant that the players have seen the proof of this person can lead us correctly.
What
Uh,
what do you think to kind of to jump off of that? Obviously, one of the biggest stories with the Spirit this year is the injuries, the long injury list. What is the impact that like a head coaching change has or does not have on even getting some of that under control? And it seems like you're talking about the timing, right? With Rodman, like maybe a boost would be getting some of these players back on the pitch.
Yeah, and it's. I will say, if several players return right when Giraldez leaves, even if it just so happens that the timelines were that they were going to come back at this point in time, I think I will say Paige Mateer is one that um, they put her on the 45-day injury list. I was told that they were probably going to have to re-up that when the first 45. They were like, it's not a season-ending injury, but to keep the roster spot, to keep the players that are injury replacement contracts, the short term deals that are there, they kind of have to keep her on some designation.
Right, shut her down. Yeah,
But her timeline was always, I think, the July break in the schedule was always when she would be back available to play is kind of what they've been aiming for. But that's just using her as an example. Like, yeah, it's going to look bad if she just suddenly returns right when the coach leaves.
yeah.
But I would like to know more about that. I would like to ask some like. Unfortunately, that press conference that we've talked about, Giraldez sitting right between the two players. We were told at the time that it was like, well, we had to move, and they did have to move the start time back by 15 minutes or something. Like, well, Jonah has a meeting as well, so we have to do it all at once, which is like, well, then have him go first.
Right.
This is maybe me having like a minor, complaint towards a comm staff that has added new people. To go to your point on stability, they just
Yeah.
added new people. Like literally, the new comms director was introducing himself to me. Like I got there half an hour before the press conference. We were meeting, and then we went to the press conference.
Yep.
So it is kind of, it's going to be interesting that like if the injury report suddenly gets very short
Gets
very
shorter.
quickly, it'll
Yeah.
at least have to someone will have to ask, right?
Yeah.
Like the question will
Yeah.
need asking. Whether we will ever get an answer or not remains to be seen, because again, he's just working in a different department in the company, right? Like he's transferred
Right.
to the France office.
Right. So this is kind of the whole point of sort of the overcooking of the transition, which is that this is someone who is leaving this club, but is not leaving the organization. And therefore that always changes the way they speak about someone like that. Like I've said this off record, I'll say it on record. I think that the Spirit could have given more information about why this was, quote, best for both parties. I think that if there is something there, that is something that in sports you see a lot, maybe a strategic leak of some kind, just to be like, here's why we think this is good for the Spirit. You can't do that when he's going to your sister club. And I want to flip this. All right, so this is the last point here that I have a question. I think you're a good person to ask. I'm going to flip this on Jonah. Sorry, Jonah, I'm flipping this on you. Do you think there will ever be, so this is where MLS is kind of a flawed model of seeing kind of what could be, because they are still a very fledgling league themselves. Do you think a high profile European coach will ever come over to the States and have a long stint and be successful? We've seen coaches come over and struggle on the pitch, and then that's why they're no longer in the league. We've seen coaches come over, and you had the weirdness with Casey Stoney in San Diego, right? That was not as long as we thought it was going to be. We have seen English coaches succeed, but a lot of them come through the American soccer structure. Will this ever happen where you're going to get, someone like Giraldez, but it turns into like, at least like a 5-year stint with some trophies won?
I would think so. I think the level of the league is for coaches. If they actually watch the league, they will be like, it's kind of undeniable that this is going to be such a bigger challenge than and I'm talking about the coaches that get to your, I'm thinking of Alexander Strauss coming from Bayern.
Sure.
That's a harder league to win than the French league if you're coaching Lyon. It's probably, I would argue, a harder league to win than if you're coaching Chelsea and playing in England. All due respect to Arsenal, but we saw what happened. Chelsea didn't even play well this year, and they won the league. So I think it will happen because both you're going to get coaches over there that are ambitious and see this as like, whether it's like, this is how I replace Emma Hayes down the road with the national team, because that's the job in world soccer, is the U.S. women's national team job. The best way to get that job is probably still to come over here and do the thing in front of everybody. So that's one path. The other thing is like, NWSL has enough ambitious clubs now where they can afford that. You mentioned San Diego. They went and hired Jonas Eidevall. That's going really well.
It is.
I know Arsenal fans were clowning him on his way out the door, but a new group of players has short term, at least half a season, responded much better than anyone expected. I think there was a lot of like, wow, San Diego, a lot of players have gone. This could go badly. He's doing quite well. I think things like that are going to help. The fact that Giraldez came here and everyone's like, well, Giraldez is like the guy. And it didn't end. It ended with like not clear-cut success. They did win a trophy, but it was the Challenge Cup. It was a one game only on penalties.
And it was on penalties. I mean, let's be real.
I think if you're an ambitious elite European coach, you kind of owe it to yourself. Like I'm kind of flipping the dynamic that Europe has been telling me my whole life. Men's and women's soccer, but it's like, if you really want to challenge yourself, you have to come over here. This is the 100%. League. And yes, if you get into the Champions League, that's great. But if you're not in that like quarterfinals and on stage, you're not getting this challenge every week. It just is. It isn't there. So I think that it's not going to be high alert for everyone. There are some coaches who are like, I don't feel like dealing with all that. But I think it will happen again. The ambition level of too many ownership groups in the league is high enough where people will pay. And if you put the money up, that kind of solves a lot of these problems. I think we're talking about the soccer side, but like ultimately, if someone can put a contract offer on the table that is a lot more than team in Europe is offering, that's going to do it.
Yeah, no, I agree. The two of us actually, Jason and I love to talk to each other because we're both very NWSL positive. We're like shaking our fists at Europe all the time, being like, it's good here too. But no, I agree. I really think the Spirit are going to be fine. I think that they're still a title contender this year. I think injuries are going to play a big part of it. You talked about this in your piece about how the roster construction is so solid. Curious what that means with a team now without a GM. That might be actually the more important thing to shore up than worrying too much about, what happens past Gonzalez's tenure. But yeah, I think the Spirit are going to be fine. Last question for you, which is we've been talking in different shades of it already, but the big NWSL concern, Gurma goes to Chelsea, Neiswanger goes to Arsenal. You've got players moving out. You've got Maria Sanchez is about to leave San Diego. She's going back down to Liga MX Femenil. We're seeing players in, we're seeing players out. Is Giraldez part of a larger issue this year of NWSL seeing some of this talent go out? Or are we still sticking with, and I sometimes go back to this, which is just that every individual case is a little bit different.
I think this one's especially an individual case. Like we've been talking about, the Kaniska thing is unprecedented in women's soccer. There is no direct analogy to draw. It's just kind of its own weird. It's not just in women's soccer. It's also in soccer. There isn't a multi-club conglomerate that runs itself the way Kaniska says it would like to run itself.
Yep.
The other Red Bull or City Football Group or whoever, there's a clear hierarchy. It is like, this is the top team, this is the next team, this is so on and so forth. Kaniska people might not be buying the idea that it's three equal parties, but they're still saying it. And to be fair to them, this is the only evidence of someone is leaving one for the other. We don't have a pattern yet. We have one data point, and then one, like, the Scylla loan is like, does this mean anything, or was it just literally like,
and loans don't bug me. It's the full transfers that bug me a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think this one is especially kind of a unique one. Now, if we're talking about this in like January and
Esma Morgan is playing for London City and
insert spirit players have gone abroad, then it would be like, this is a big problem. I was talking about this in general. I think the Spirit can't afford that. They have a very special opportunity in DC specifically that they can be the soccer team in DC, full stop. They just had higher attendance than DC United. And like I said, it was brutally humid. Sunday, it was unpleasant to be out at the stadium, and they did it anyway. But if the regular run-of-the-mill sports fan gets the perception that this is the AAA affiliate to OL Lyonnes, they will stop showing up. They will be like, I already know about this. I've seen MLS. I've been to those games. It's not as good. They can't actually tell. You can't just show them the soccer and be like, which one's better. They're not going to know. But if you tell them, hey, this is the club that you leave to go to the better one, that's it. That's the ball game. So they cannot allow that perception to creep in at all. I think they really need to be, their next couple of moves have to be very savvy. And like I said, like, if it's not a Rodman contract, then it's got to be something else. It's got to be someone coming from the outside that is like, that can break, that someone like us will tell regular people that are not super close paying attention, like, hey, this is good. If we can say it and be honest, they'll be like, okay, my concerns are allayed. But right now they still have to deal with that.
So to sum it up, Trinity Rodman, you're on the clock. They're going to buy you a big new truck. Michele Kang, still Kang positive, but we're watching. We're keeping an eye. We're making a list just in case. And I think the Spirit are going to be fine, but it's a really, really interesting moment to watch a quality club, a good team, go through this. So much to discuss. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about at the end of the season as well. Thank you, Jason, so much for joining me and giving me all of the inside scoop on all of this. Always interesting to see what's happening on the ground. Tell all the people where they can follow you and find your work.
I'm on Blue Sky at Jason DC Soccer. It's all one word. It's very easy. I'm on Instagram at _Jason_Anderson, but I'm really just posting like Instagram stories that are like, this is the game I went to keep count of how many. It's selfish. Ultimately, it's self-protection. And then the sites are USA Today Sports and prosoccerwire.usatoday.com. I think that's all of it. I hope so anyway. I can't do much more.
USAtoday.com. Can't get much bigger than that. All right. Thank you, Jason, so much for joining.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
The Late Sub is part of the Just Women Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women Sports newsletter and follow Just Women Sports across all your favorite channels.